Okay, thank you so much. And it's my great honor to participate in today's conference. And first, I would like to give a brief introduction. I'm a bachelor student majoring in English in the Northeastern University in China, and I will be a Master of Education program in the University of Hong Kong for the Comparative and Global Studies in Education Development. And now I'm a research assistant at the UNESCO International Center for Higher Education Innovation at the International Institute of Online Education by using the virtual education technologies or the artificial intelligence to facilitate the teacher education for their education technology in Asia and Africa. So first, I would like to give a research background about the social stratification and firstly is about definition. The industrialized and relatively lasting system of social inequality based on laws or rules and structures. And also the Karl Marx's the class theories associated with social stratification, which emphasizes the modern industry, has led to a rapid increase in wealth, resulting in an increase in the gap between the rich and the poor, rather than all people equally enjoy the benefits of growth, which leads to the outcomes in China's higher education, which is that the economic growth isn't equal to the upward social mobility, and social stratification will lead to the educational stratification. Also, another theory associated with social stratification is Weber's stratification theory, which involves three multi-dimensional perspectives on society, which are wealth, reputation, and power. And notably, the reputation which refers to the social evaluation, social honor towards different groups of identity, certain groups of identity. So in China's education, this phenomenon can be shown in the underlying logic of market economy and capitalism in higher education academia, which is also neoliberalism attitude towards higher education, which is judging the students by competition achievements. And also in China, the vocational education is not respected by society by the citizens in China because of the reputation influence. And also, we should pay attention to the social stratification structure of Western developed countries, which is conducive to social stability. And just like this picture, the middle class take the most important part for the stable social characteristics. As the middle class has got politically moderate attitudes and conservative attitudes, and their strong economic consumption capability, and also they abide the law in social performance. While in China, the current social stratum structure is not yet mature, and at this stage, the social stratum structure is not reasonable, is still changing, and does not adapt to the modernization drive. So the reasons for differentiation and recognition of social stratification structure involving the China's basic economic system has changed. Before the People's Republic of China was established, we used and before the reform and opening up in policy in the 1978, we used a single public ownership economy in the past. But we transferred to the public ownership as the main body and multiple ownership for common development. And also the Industrial Revolution leads to the social stratum differentiation. The industrial structure drives the optimal social member structure, which changes the social mobility. And thirdly, the marketization acts as the pulling force of social stratum differentiation. New industries closely related to the transformative market leads to the emergence of new social strata and the new requirements for the higher education talents cultivation. And the second part is about literature review. The factors of social stratification, including the two major ones, which are the family background and the social context, And the definition of social justice is the most widely recognized one is about the morally proper distribution of social benefits and burdens. And also we need to take the global context of mass higher education trend into consideration, which means that there is the phenomenon, the positive phenomenon of the mass higher education is that in the ever intensifying globalization, the higher education is no longer a guarantee of employment, higher earnings, or most importantly, upward social mobility. And the relationship between social mobility and the university credentials is being challenged in the mass higher education worldwide. So the third part is about data analysis and findings. This research is based on intensive secondary data analysis and fieldwork observations in Chinese context. The first aspects of the data analysis about educational stratification in rural and the urban area in China. In China, there is different residence systems, mechanism for management with the dichotomy division. So in these 14 aspects are different between the urban and the rural residents, and especially the housing, education, and the medical treatment, welfare. And so the dual social structure leads to the dual economic structure, and which also lead to the dual educational stratification. And just like this picture, it is the residence system, the credits paper for to distinguish the urban residents and rural residents with different welfare policy. So the registered residence stratification experience a developed process from allow citizens to move freely between rural and countryside area to persuade and stop farmers from flowing into cities. And after the 1960s, because of the economic difficulties and shortages in supply of food and daily necessities, the China government completely banning the farmers from living and getting the long-term residence in cities. And so another factor is the marketization and decredentialization of education. The marketization in the mid-1980s led to a mix of private and public consumption of education instead of the monopolistic role of the state in education provision before. So with the emergence of China's education, with diversification, marketization, privatization, commodification, and decentralization, which leads to several advantages like enhanced initiatives and enthusiasm of local educational institutions. But on the other hand, it leads to the disadvantages, including reduced the state's role in providing and financing social services, especially for the rural students. And also it enlarged the educational gap between the region pool for the choice of shadow education, which also means the private schooling for the off-campus training, tutoring. And also the farmers are the main component of Chinese society, and the Chinese population of components shown in this graph, we can see that the orange one is the urban population, and the blue one are the rural population. And we can find that the rural in China, the rural population, the blue ones, they are much higher than the urban population component. And but only in the recent decades, in the last decades, we can see in the 2010, they are just average from about 50 to 50 of the urban and rural. And nowadays in 2020, the urbanization progress is higher than the rural population. So the farmers are the main problems in the countryside agriculture and farmers. Their support is one of the main tasks for China's development. And we can find that even though the problem of food and clothing has been basically solved in the rural area, the dilemma of uneven development is still a big challenge for the migrant workers who are still in dilemma of urban and rural dual development, and their migrant mobility from the rural to the urban areas are still restricted. And also for the proportion, this kind of urban and rural gap reflect in the educational stratification. According to a survey in Peking University, the students from countryside fell from 30% to 10% proportion, and the lower the family background, the worse the school. This trend is being intensified and solidified, and the proportion of rural students in China's top universities has been declining since the 1990s. The top two university, Tsinghua University in China, the 2020 rural students only accounted for only 17%. So we should pay attention to the massification of higher education in China. The Chinese colleges and universities have been expanding enrollment in recent 5 years with a scale of more than 2 million. And we can see in this graph about the enrollment of general college, secondary vocational education, and general high school from the recent 4 years. We can find that the enrollment of secondary vocational education and ordinary high school has shown an increasing trend on the whole. And also in the secondary vocational education plays an important part in society, and it still faces the challenge of income level and social concept. And we should notice that the publicly owned but privately run institutions in China for a type of higher education component are perceived as a way for the Chinese education planners to achieve the policy objective of expanding enrollment rate, which means that the massification of higher education in China, the number of increasing enrollment is not concentrated in the world-class universities or the top-tier universities, but the enlargement of the enrollment number, they concentrated in the second level universities, which are not so prominent, and the main student source are from the rural China with the lower education quality. And the second aspect of the data analysis is about the education stratification in different parts of China and the socio-economic status of households difference. We can find that in China, Eastern development is more advanced than the middle and the western part of China. And we can see from this picture, the distribution of the top university, which are these two projects naming universities in China, is concentrated in the coastal area, especially the eastern area, with these top universities. And also the central and the western provinces students, they have difficulty in going to top universities because of the poor education quality. And from this part, we can see this picture, we can see the socio-economic status, which influencing the educational stratification. From this data, we can see the top three, Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong SAR, they have got the most wealthy families with assets of 6 million yuan every year for the family income. But in contrast, the tuition fee pressure has been a big problem for the students from rural schools whose parents are most farmers. And in 1990s in China, the university school tuition fees are only 200 RMB per year. But in the 2008, the average tuition fees increased to the 6,000 RMB per year, and which means that it needs an ordinary farmer in China's interior the equivalent of the 35 years of income, the total income to provide his children to get the 4-year bachelor's degree tuition fee. In the China's
You are just about finished, so if you could wrap up.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. And so I will finish in 1 minute by showing my PPT. So the China's measure using the double reduction policy to restrict the shadow education. And also in the comparative market, the mass education didn't bring the positive employment because of the competitive and enlarging enrollment students number. And also we developed some proposals and suggestions, just like focusing on the vulnerable group with a low socio-economic status, and realize the social justice and share the benefits of social development to in these 5 aspects involving labor markets and assisting the migrant workers, and also improve the social welfare. And also the future research should focus on these 4 aspects, just like the focus on the job attainment, the entry-level wage, and for the graduates, and eventually upward social mobility outcome evaluation. But in the conclusion, the China's mass higher education will face a bright future because it is still in the initial process. According to the human capital theory, in the future, when the mass higher education size is reached a certain degree, we will reduce the inequality as expansion reaches the mass higher education. So here are the references, and thanks for your attention. And sorry again for my time limitation. And if you have got any other questions, please contact me via the email and the telephone to know more about Chinese higher education. And I'm also looking forward to learn more from you, communicate with international education. Thank you so much.